Good morning, this is Chris.
And good morning, this is Paul.
Reading the Society news for Friday, the 10th of February. On Monday, please note that interviews for the new CEO will be taking place throughout the day in Millbrook House. The building may be busy. Tuesday, the strollers will be meeting this Tuesday, the 14th of February. The stroll will be at Northwood Park, with lunch afterwards at the Fountain Inn Cowes. The group will meet for coffee at Churchill's in Northwood at 10:30 a.m. The next session of Introducing Millbrook House will take place on Tuesday the 14th of February. This is a chance for anybody to come along and discover what is available in terms of equipment or services to visually impaired people. Introducing Millbrook House is open to everyone who would like to find out more about what is on offer. The session runs from 10:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. The Dolphins group will be meeting to swim on Tuesday, again 14th of February, at the Waterside Pool in Ryde. The pool is closed to the public during this session. If you would like to go swimming, please call the Society first to advise us of your level of swimming ability. Please note lifeguards are in attendance during this session. On Wednesday, the weekly coffee morning will be held as usual to support the Society this Wednesday, the 15th of February. The coffee mornings are not just for blind and partially sighted people. Anybody can come along and have a cup of coffee or tea as well as a piece of cake. The Owls will be meeting on Wednesday the 15th of February at 2 p.m. at Millbrook House. The entertainment for this week's meeting is Rachel Jackson, and she will be singing and playing her guitar. The group lasts approximately 45 minutes, which is then followed by tea or coffee and cake. Thursday, the Knitters and Natterers are meeting on the 16th of February at Millbrook House. The group starts at 10:30 until 2 p.m. You can knit or just natter, and then later in the afternoon volunteers come in and read to the group from different topics. On Friday, any other news? On Friday the 17th of March, the Brading Roman Villa is holding a special day for visually impaired people on the island. There will be guided tours of the museum, as well as opportunities to handle artefacts from the museum. Should there be a large number of people wishing to attend, the staff at the museum will break up the large group into smaller groups. Anyone wishing to attend must register with the Isle of Wight Society for the Blind first. There may be also an opportunity to handle some tactile artwork by the Isle of Wight artist Lindy Moles. This is a free event, but you will have to pay for your own teas and coffees at the museum, and anyone requiring transport may have to pay a small fee towards fuel. Please note transport may be available to some of the groups, but please call the Society first on 522205. Scaffolding news. Please find below a list of known footway obstructions for works including scaffolding or hoarding. We are unable to include end dates as many are extended on a week-by-week basis. Also included are
tables and chairs permits that have been issued in the past week. Bay Area, 11A St John's Road, Sandown. Napoleon's Landing, Esplanade, Sandown. 2A York Road, Sandown. Trouville Hotel, Esplanade, Sandown. European Court, Melville Street Side, Sandown. The Ocean Hotel, High Street, Sandown, due up to the 13th of February. Artie Shakes, 8 Falcon Cross Road, Shanklin, due up the 17th of February. New Cherry Pickers or Cranes, Shanklin Cliff Lift, East Cliff Esplanade, Shanklin, due up the 28th of February. East Cliff Promenade will be shut to pedestrians for these works. Shanklin Cliff Lift, Lift Road, Shanklin, due up 28th of February. The area around the cliff lift will be closed to pedestrians for these works. Cowes area, the Watch House Lane, Cowes. 59 St Mary's Road, Cowes. Development site, Castle Street, East Cowes. GKN, Clarence Road, East Cowes. 15 Alfred Street, East Cowes. 2 Sun Hill, Cowes. 272 to 283 Arctic Road, Cowes. Newport area, Nipper Court, West Street, Newport. Diva Hairdressing, Ace Shoe Repairs, vacant premises 91 to 94 Pyle Street, Newport. Newport Minster, St Thomas Square, Newport. 35 New Street, Newport. 10 Portland Street, Newport. McDonald's, 93 to 94 St James Street, Newport. Newport Quay Hotel, Quay Street, Newport, due up the 16th of February. Willow Cottage, 23 High Street, Carisbrooke, due up the 20th of February. There will be traffic lights there. Ryde area, 32 Melville Street, Ryde. 26 Nelson Street, Ryde. The Hare Centre, 13 to 14 High Street, Ryde. The Anchorage, Seaview Road, Seaview. Scaffold is on Rope Walk. 19 George Street, Ryde. The Bag Shop, Ice Cream Shop and Fish and Chip Shop, corner of Union Street and the Esplanade, Ryde. 10 Wyndham House, Melville Street, Ryde. Sea Hill House, Pier Road, Seaview. The Sloop Inn, Mill Square, Wooden Bridge. Yardley, West Street, Seaview, due up the 20th of February. West area, none to report. South Wight area, 2 Trinity Road, Ventnor. Spa Shop, 1 West Street, Wroxall. The White Lion, Blackgang Road, Knighton, due up the 13th of February. Former Mill Bay Hotel, Esplanade, Ventnor. This week's In Touch. In this week's episode, media commentator Kevin Mulhern gives his view on the leadership situation at RNIB and GDBA, the leading UK charities for blind and partially sighted people. Both organisations currently have temporary chief executive officers in place, and Kevin speculates on the impact this could have on the confidence of blind people in the charities' ability to lead and lobby for them in the future. Tom Walker meets Les Lightfoot, who was the victim of a serious assault last year. Les talks about how he rebuilt his confidence with the help of Henshaw's Society for Blind People, and has written his own set of tips for other blind and visually impaired people on how they can stay safe and protect themselves. These are available on the Henshaw's website.
And now for the headlines in the Isle of Wight County Press, Friday the 10th of February. Castle of Dreams. 100 million Norris project unveiled. Ambitious £100 million plans to save the historic Norris Castle and create 350 jobs into the bargain have been unveiled by its new owners. Development company U Avend Norris Castle bought the Grade 1 listed building last year for a staggering £4.7 million, significantly more than the £1 million guide price, with plans to reopen it as a 5-star hotel. Following meetings this week with residents and town councillors, the company said it had assembled a highly regarded heritage team of architects and landscape consultants to draw up proposals for the restoration of the East Cowes Castle and grounds. Further details about the development, which the company said would include a luxury hotel, function facilities and restaurants, creating up to 350 jobs and a £20 million boost to the island's economy, are set to be released in the coming weeks. U Avend Norris Castle Chief Executive Eamon O'Connor said, "It is still very early days. However, it is our aim for this development to significantly and positively contribute to the East Cowes and Isle of Wight economy, as well as safeguard a beautifully and historically sensitive building. We will launch the proposals in March and undertake a detailed consultation with local people and encourage residents to pass their comments and ideas to us. Once Queen Victoria's childhood retreat, the 225-acre Norris Castle estate includes the 2-bedroom lodge cottage, 3-bedroom Norris cottage and 4-bedroomed Norris farmhouse, plus a mile of waterfront. Built in 1799, the main castle has 15 bedrooms, a grand hall, a circular drawing room and extensive cellars. It has been long neglected, however, and has been placed on Historic England's risk register. U Avend has discussed its plans with Historic England and the Isle of Wight Council and intends to submit a planning application this year.
Kezza's Healing Garden, a poignant reminder of the tragically short life of Kezza Flux Edmonds, is set to bloom in East Cowes. A memorial garden and play area will be a lasting tribute to the 6-year-old who was murdered at her home in Cromwell Avenue in the town by her father last June. The site on Beatrice Avenue is opposite Queensgate Primary School, which Kezza attended, and her classmates will help decorate the garden by painting handprints on the fence. The garden is being designed by Barrett Homes and it will contain play equipment with planting to keep it as close to nature as possible. Kezza's mum, Nikki Flux Emmons, 49, said it was a place I'd hoped for. It's a beautiful spot across from the school and it'll be really lovely for the children from the estate and children and parents coming out of the primary school. It will help their healing. They have a picture of Kezzy up in the school and talk about her in classes, so she's still very much part of their thoughts. They all remember her. The campaign for a memorial garden was started shortly after Kezza's death by Alison Nutman, who has twin boys the same age. However, the project has now been taken over by Kezza's mum, who will be donating £2,000 towards the cause, as she wants to give back to the community which helped her so much. A further £6,000 has been raised through crowdfunding, events and donations. Nikki of Highfield Road, Newport said, "Obviously I remember her forever, but it's nice to have a lasting memory that's come from the community. It means other people love her too, and I don't think you can ever be loved too much. It's a huge comfort which helped me get through the day, knowing there's stuff to do for her still." Speaking about what Kezza would think of the garden, she added, she would love it. It was said by her school teachers she would often be the child who would go and sit with the child if they were upset and try to encourage them to play. So the fact it will be a play area and somewhere where people can enjoy and have fun, she would be ecstatic. She had a little soft toy dog that she took around with her everywhere from when she was about 9 months old. Its name was Wilson. If someone was particularly sad, then she would give them Wilson to hold because she thought he was magical. As her mum, I am so proud and grateful people are helping to achieve something beautiful for her.
Shops counting cost of vegetable crisis. Island greengrocers and wholesalers are taking a hit on profits to keep shelves stocked in the face of a national shortage. Due to severe weather conditions in Spain, there has been widespread vegetable shortages, including lettuces, courgettes and aubergines. Barren supermarket shelves have been a common sight in island supermarkets, and some chains are even imposing a limit per customer. However, Island suppliers are still offering many of the hard-to-come-by vegetables, even taking a hit on profits just to keep the shelves stocked. Lucy Henley, manager at Farmhouse Fair Newport, said prices had soared, with courgettes rocketing from £6 to £25 a box. We've been able to get the goods, it's just the price. Customers have been coming into us because they can't get it elsewhere, she said. Lee Hunt, co-owner of Hunt's Fruit and Vegetable Wholesaler, has been selling at cost price or even taking a loss to ensure everything is available for his customers. He said, "We've had a couple of days when the prices have been a bit rough, but a lot of it I am subsidising myself. A lot of the stuff has been expensive to the point where I'm selling it for less than it cost me to buy. In order to survive, you've got to, and prices level out eventually. There's more than 1 week in the year, and we'll claw it back in the summer." James Shavarian, owner of Barrow Boys Ride, said a box of 12 aubergines was £26.80 last week, which was 3 times the usual price. "You've just got to weather the storm and wait for things to get back to normal," he said. By keeping things seasonal and local, the Bridlesford farm shop at Wootton has been mostly unaffected. However, lettuce doubling in price has caused them to take a hit on their margins. "I feel we're muddling through pretty well. I haven't had any cause for terrible concern," said Louise Griffin. She added, "We can't compete with the weather, can we?" And following on from that story, local growers happy to fill the shortage. Island vegetable growers Will and Amy Stewart of Living Larder stress there are lots of seasonal vegetables available to islanders, meaning they don't have to worry about any shortages from the imported market. "Purple sprouting broccoli is plentiful and delicious at the moment," said Will. "There are so many locally grown vegetables available, all kinds of cabbages and greens, kale and Brussels. Root vegetables are plentiful, and because of the warm couple of weeks recently, there are lots of cauliflowers too. The biggest advantage of our eating seasonally is that our produce is picked the day of delivery. Plus, you never get bored as produce availability changes from week to week."
Isle of Wight NHS deficit likely to hit £12 million. The Isle of Wight NHS Trust is likely to face a £12 million deficit at the end of the year, and failing to hit targets has meant it has missed out on significant funding. The Trust was aiming for a £4.6 million shortfall, but the cost of agency staff and the lack of elective surgery has made that impossible. Around £3.5 million worth of funding was expected to come from the Sustainability and Transformation Plan, STP, which sees the island services link up with mainland trusts. But the trust failed to hit the targets needed to access the funding, despite the plan being ranked one of the top 5 in the country. The news follows the Isle of Wight Clinical Commissioning Group's, CCG's, announcement it also needs to save £12 million next year. Karen Baker, Chief Executive of the Isle of Wight NHS Trust, said, "In December we were absolutely chocker and overwhelmed with the amount of work. We couldn't hit the targets we had signed up to, therefore we didn't get the additional funding. Some elective surgery has been cancelled in order to free up beds, and costly agency staff have been hired to help look after patients. The income the hospital gets from an inpatient is around a third of what it would get from an elective surgery patient." Dr. Mark Pugh, Executive Medical Director at the Trust, said, "We have nearly double the number of medical patients than expected. We need to have one consultant per 20 to 30 beds, so we simply have to hire extra staff to look after extra patients. If we don't see a change on the Isle of Wight, so we reduce the numbers of inpatients we get, then we would have to rethink the medical model."
Post office moves to bank hopes. A new home for the post office in Cowes could be announced soon. The facility has been operating from a mobile unit at Cowes Yacht Haven on a temporary basis, and there has been a lot of speculation about where its permanent base will be. The Mill Hill Road Cooperative store was rumoured to be in the running, but plans never materialised. A new application is being processed and an announcement is likely to be made within 4 to 6 weeks, Councillor Mark McNeil said at a Cowes Town Council meeting last week. Councillors recently met with Island MP Andrew Turner to discuss the possibility of the post office moving into the Lloyds Bank building in the town, and Mr Turner said he would look into the matter. Councillor Vanessa Slade said, "I have heard the post office is going to fully join the banking system and people will be able to do all their transactions there. So if we get one in Cowes, it would solve all our problems in one swoop." And also in Cowes, £3 million cash point crisis. Cash points roll out £3 million during Cowes Week, and the town will struggle when banks close down and take the facilities with them, town councillors claim. HSBC, Lloyds and NatWest have either closed or are going to close, along with their hole-in-the-wall machines. Sainsbury's and Marks & Spencer will house the only remaining cash points in the town and may struggle to cope, councillors said at a Cowes Town Council meeting last week. The council agreed to look into buying a cash machine for the town and will inquire about the costs and rules associated with setting one up. Councillor Laura P.C. Wilcox said, "When I spoke to a bank manager, he told me £3 million goes out of cash points during Cowes Week. We are the yachting mecca of the world. I just can't understand the thought process of these banks."
Village pub to get a new look and name. Knighton's historic White Lion pub, which has been closed for a year, is set to reopen in time for Easter, sporting a new name, the Knighton Arms. Publican Matt Parker is close to sealing a deal with the pub's owners, Enterprise Inns, and aims to turn it into a top-quality gastro pub. Matt, who currently runs 2 pubs in Newport and has previous business in Cowes, told the county press he wanted to change the name to differentiate it from the other island White Lion pub in Arreton. He joked it could go down badly or could it be welcomed with open arms. There are 2 White Lions on the island, which creates a lot of confusion. I want to turn Knighton into a destination. Work has started on the inside, but I'm still negotiating the terms of the lease with Enterprise Inns. The pub is being refurbished inside and out before its planned Easter reopening in a bid to restore its historic character. Matt added, "It's in a terrible state. Workmen have already uncovered historic stained glass windows, which were covered up. The refurbishment is about restoring the pub to its original state, which will cost thousands. We will be hiring local people and turning it into a destination venue." He said the pub in the post office opposite the White Lion, and which opened at Christmas, and he will be catering to a different market. Meanwhile, the Fleming Arms in Binstead, which closed in November, is set to officially reopen this evening. That's Friday today. The pub gained worldwide fame for its comic blackboard signs outside, but shut its doors due to financial pressure. The pub has been refurbished in a unique style and is the first pub venture for business partners Michelle Moody, 48, from Ryde, and her friend of 8 years, Ross Lowe, 52, from Wootton. Ross said, "I can't wait, to be honest. I'm really excited."
Care hubs could come from £250,000 regeneration grant. Regeneration plans for the island have been boosted by a £250,000 government grant. The One Public Estate funding is designed to help make the most of public land and follows a grant of £50,000 for the council to develop a delivery plan with partners, including the NHS, Homes and Communities Agency, Police and Fire and Rescue Service. The council is set to receive £65,000 in the coming year and £185,000 the following year. An Isle of Wight council spokesman said the cash was earmarked for projects including locality hubs in Pyle Street, Newport and the Heights, Sandown. The hubs are part of My Life, a Full Life project, designed to integrate health and social care, although exact details of what services would be based at the hubs have not been revealed. The money will also be used to explore a joint emergency service centre for fire, police and ambulance services. There could also be a redevelopment of the Camp Hill prison site. The council has previously mooted plans for creating a garden village on the site. Council Executive Member for Regeneration, Councillor Julie Jones-Evans, said, "This award is great news for the island and demonstrates the government is recognising the joint working of the council and its partners to deliver and sustain public services."
War pilot Mary flies to 100. Second World War pilot Mary Ellis, one of the last surviving members of the Air Transport Auxiliary, celebrated her 100th birthday. Mary delivered more than 1,000 aircraft to squadrons throughout the UK, including Spitfires and bombers during the war. She was one of 168 women who served in the Air Transport Auxiliary, risking their lives to deliver aircraft to the front line. She had to fly in bad weather at risk of being shot down and often in planes that had not been properly flight tested. She celebrated her birthday with a surprise party at Sandown Airport, where she was manager for 20 years, from 1950 to 1970. A painting of Mary as a 23-year-old standing in front of a Spitfire was presented to her by Derek Hermiston Hooper, the chairman of the Royal Flying Corps and Royal Navy Air Service. The portrait was painted by Ivan Berryman of Wootton Bridge. In November last year, Mary was honoured in front of the Queen at the Royal Festival of Remembrance at the Royal Albert Hall. Also in November, Mary was awarded with the Master Air Pilot Certificate by the Honourable Company of Air Pilots.
Award for nurses who tackled fire. 2 nurses have been praised after they extinguished a fire caused by a patient setting an oxygen tube alight at St Mary's Hospital. The patient was on Colwell ward in December, and staff nurse Christy Garcilanosa and bank staff nurse Kate Nelson were on duty. The patient's family had previously taken away cigarettes from the bedside but left the lighter. The patient, who was confused at the time, removed their oxygen tube and set it on fire using the lighter, resulting in the bed linen and nearby table being scorched. Kate and Christy rushed into the room, turned off the oxygen tank and quickly extinguished the blaze. No one was injured. The pair received awards from Isle of Wight NHS Trust Chief Executive Karen Baker on Wednesday, who said a massive explosion could have occurred if it wasn't for their swift action.
College's new head will be aiming high. The Improving Cows Enterprise College will be aiming to go from strength to strength under a new principal. The academy, supported by the Ormiston Archimedes Trust, Academics Trust, OAT, has begun its search for a new head after John Peckham said he was to retire. Mr Peckham will initially support the new principal in a strategic advisory role. OAT said he had helped set the academy on course for success with the school achieving one of the best sets of GCSE results on the island last summer. Results show improvement year on year, scoring well above the island average. Mr Peckham said, "While I'm sad to be reducing the time I spend at Cowes, I'm proud of the solid foundations in place for sustained improvement." Cowes Enterprise College is quickly becoming a school of choice, with Year 7 applications up 13% since 2014. The number of students completing Year 13 has trebled, and more students than ever are going on to many of the best universities. This is a fantastic opportunity for an ambitious and talented new leader to keep driving the academy forward. OAT's Chief Executive Officer Toby Salt paid tribute to Mr Peckham, saying he had left big shoes to fill, but was confident the school could attract first-class candidates to build on his legacy.
Police get spit guards. Isle of Wight police will be able to use controversial spit guards to protect themselves from infectious diseases. The hoods are made of light, see-through, breathable material and will only be used on people who have already spat at officers or who are about to spit, and only when a suspect has already been handcuffed, police said. A Hampshire police spokesman said, "Increasingly, assaults involve the spitting of blood, not just saliva. Emergency services personnel are at risk of blood-borne virus contamination from these bodily fluids entering their mouth, nose, eyes, or an open wound. This poses a risk of transmitting a range of infectious diseases, including hepatitis C. The use of spit guards will reduce the potential for transmitting these infectious diseases. They are already being used by a number of forces. Spit guards are already used in custody, and this will now be extended to all frontline staff." Since April last year, 126 assaults involving spitting have been recorded by Hampshire and Isle of Wight police, and the spitting of blood is increasing, the force said. But their introduction by other forces has prompted criticism from some, including human rights campaigners Liberty. Sarah Ogilvie, policy officer at Liberty, said, "Spit hoods belong in the dark ages, not in a rights-respecting democracy. Their use can only lead to discrimination and human rights abuses. We've already seen them used against children and adults with mental health problems, causing great distress and fear. Police do an important job and need to be able to protect themselves and others, which is why they are allowed to use necessary and proportionate force, but spit hoods are neither." Following consultation, the decision was made jointly with Thames Valley Police and will be implemented once training has been completed. When using a spit guard, officers will be required to explain the reason for its use and will monitor the suspect at all times. Officers will need to maintain the dignity of the suspect throughout the process, a police spokesman said. Police and Crime Commissioner Michael Lane said, "Assaulting police officers is unacceptable and needs to be understood by the public to be so. A particularly vile method of spitting, and this also carries with it potential health risks."
A burglar caught after rare currency cash-in. Attempts to exchange rare Iraqi currency at an island post office led police to the burglar who had stolen £13,000 worth of property from a ride home. Michael Phillips, 33, of no fixed abode, is now serving a 43-month jail term after missing the burglary at Portsmouth Crown Court last Friday. He was arrested after his then partner Zoe Davis, also of no fixed abode, tried to exchange dinar stolen in the raid for pounds at the town's post office. The currency was so rare on the Isle of Wight police had to put out an alert for anyone who had tried to exchange it. The court was told how the occupants of the detached property were asleep upstairs when Phillips and another individual broke in, disabling the alarm system. Many high-value items, including a silver Rolex watch, electrical equipment and items of sentimental value, were taken during the burglary, which took place sometime between August the 1st and 4th last year. After the raid, Davis, 35, tried to exchange the currency but was arrested along with Phillips. Their home was searched, and hidden beneath a sofa, the wire cutters used to disable the alarm were discovered, as well as a handbag and headphones taken in the raid. Phillips denied any involvement, but police acted on information received and also discovered a laptop stolen in the burglary with his fingerprints on the screen. Phillips admitted one offence of burglary and another offence of possession of a Class A controlled drug. He also admitted a separate offence of stealing a £250 bicycle from Ryde. Davis admitted one offence of handling stolen goods. For Phillips, Kelly Brockenhurst said his client's offending related to drug addiction and the burglary had been prompted by a drug debt. For Davis, Rob Harding said his client experienced a road to Damascus moment. She has split with Phillips, who was described as violent and controlling, and said she just wanted to get on with her life. Judge Sarah Munro jailed Phillips for 43 months. She sentenced Davis to a 12-month community order.
Rotary sale raises £32,000. Thanks to the last-minute offer of a venue, Shanklin's Rotary Club's 2017 sale went ahead and even smashed last year's fundraising total. The sale raised £32,000, which will be donated to various causes, including island charities, beating last year's figure by £5,000. The annual event, the biggest on the island's Rotary Club calendar, had been cancelled because the usual venue, Landguard Holiday Park Shanklin, was due to be undergoing refurbishment. But thankfully, the centre owners held back on those plans and allowed Shanklin Rotary use of the venue for 12 days last month. The operation to collect goods from households in the Sandown Bay area was run like a well-oiled military operation, following an unbroken run of sales in Shanklin for more than 10 years. One of the event's organisers, Town Councillor John Fleming, was delighted with the success of this year's sale. He said, "Raising so much money was a real bonus. It is money we simply weren't expecting. The sale has become a major community project which has brought lots of people together. It's amazing the help we've had from individuals and various organisations such as the Sandown and Shanklin Rowing Club, Shanklin Cricket Club and the Hurricanes Rugby Club. The holiday park allowed us to use the cafe to make money as well. The good news is we were offered use of the venue again next year. The sale has now raised more than £330,000 over the past decade."
Budget reductions defended by Tories. Budget cuts proposed by the Isle of Wight Council's new Tory-led coalition administration were put under the microscope by council watchdogs this week. Changes to social care provision, closing Limbottom Tip 1 day a week, and changes to the IWPFI contract were just some of the issues highlighted at Tuesday's scrutiny meeting. Council leader Councillor Dave Stewart said they had been presented with a budget substantially worked on by the previous administration. He added the primary goal of the new administration was to present a legal and balanced budget. Turning to plans to raise council tax by 4.99%, he said, "We take the view adult social care is that important to the island." However, Labour's councillor Jeff Lumley said there was a gaping hole in the savings. the authority was hoping to make in the social care budget. He said the risk element is enormous. We are talking about really vulnerable people. We need a full explanation of the figures before full council. The authority's new deputy leader, Councillor Stuart Hutchinson, was also quizzed over proposed changes to the PFI contract. If agreed, the change would mean at the end of the 25-year contract, roads would not have been maintained for 7 years. Councillor Hutchinson said, had we not got the PFI, our roads would now be full of potholes and in considerable state. We were offered a substantial amount of free money from the government. If we are in a healthy financial situation 10 or 12 years from now, we could adjust it and put it back. It is such a long time ahead. Under the proposals, cutting the council's short breaks budget and axing an annual fun day for disabled youngsters could also be on the cards. Councillor Lumley added there is no fun under the Tories. However, Councillor Stewart said the budget would ensure core services were maintained. And there's a few online reaction to the spending cuts. Perhaps a better question would be why is so much money wasted on a police and crime commissioner and their entourage. Again and again this council cuts services to our most vulnerable of people. Disgraceful. Having seized control of the council with the most unholy alliance ever seen on this island, the minority Conservative group are about to demonstrate very clearly why they must not be considered so soon for re-election to run the council. The council wring their hands and wail they have no money, so council tax must go buy up as much as they can get. Never do you get the impression they consider for one moment how the taxpayer will fund the increase. If you have to live hand to mouth with very little or no money left, each week how are you supposed to pay the increase? Once again young people suffer. Why? Because older people vote Tory. Remember, it is the Tory government imposing these cuts. The Isle of Wight Council is just the fall guy. Conservative hate society and destroying local government is their aim. Sadly, with no credible opposition, no one is to stop them. And this is an article here by Sam Jeffries. Despite assurances about maintaining levels of service, disability rights campaigner Sam Jeffries, who has been nationally recognised for his work, said the changes were very concerning. Sam, a volunteer for MenCap, said for people with personal budgets, this will be devastating because it means not only will they lose one-to-one support in their homes, but will lose part of all their day's services. Personal budgets are assessed by the needs of the person and not by money. I can understand if a person's needs are less than they receive, less support and less money, but the assessment has to come first.
And following on from that, where will higher floating bridge fare go? Part of the budget proposals, including increasing the floating bridge pedestrian return fare from £1 to £1.50. Megan Lebrun-Allo, 18, an apprentice pharmacist of Bellevue Road, Cowes, said, "As I am still under 19, the journey is free. But as I am on an apprentice wage, it will be a big chunk of money. If it was spent on services for vulnerable people, it would make me feel better, but that does not mean I would not struggle." Emma Ralph, 22, of Pelham Road, Cowes, who works at OC Sport, East Cowes, said, "A 50p increase still does not seem like a lot. I suppose I will have to wait and see if I can still afford it. I don't know everything about how the extra money raised would be used, but it would be a good thing if it was spent on services for vulnerable people, but you are never entirely sure the money will go there." Pascal Micklewayne, 25, of Moor Green Road, Cowes, who also works at OC Sport, said, "The cost of travelling has gone from nothing to £1.50 quite quickly. If you know it's not going into someone's pocket, that makes it better, but I would still rather it was £1.
And it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from Chris.
And now we're about to start. Your readers today are Peter Boffin
and this is Madeline, and we're going to start by reading letters. And the first one is from Jerry Moglione in Cowes, and it's about rugby. I was deeply saddened by the report of the incidents of abuse suffered by referees from both players and spectators in the county press on the 3rd of February, but I was not totally surprised, as over the years the standards of behaviour both on and off the field have degenerated to an all-time low. As someone who was actively involved in many sports for over 70 years, mainly as a physical education specialist, some of my happiest days were when I managed the Isle of Wight schools under-16 teams for a number of years. The days when the coach's word and the referee's decisions were law. But over the years, the whole ethos and spirit of the noble game has been sullied, where petulant Premier Division managers and overexposed and overpaid prima donna players choose to ignore the rules of the game and question every decision. Sadly, this attitude filters down to the lower levels of the game and is seen as the normal behaviour across the board. Perhaps the FA should take note of the game of rugby, where the official's rule is law, and woe betide anyone who disputes it.
And here's the letter of the week. It's from Anne Harris, who's the director of the Care Rainbow Trust, which is a children's charity. She says, "This Valentine's Day, couples everywhere will be looking forward to a romantic night out, to focus on each other and to enjoy time away from the hectic daily life. For parents caring for a life-threatened or terminally ill child, life doesn't stop on February the 14th. Many are unable to head out for a relaxing meal due to the complexities of their child's condition, and finding a babysitter can be next to impossible when your child is so ill. The Rainbow Trust Children's Charity supports families on the Isle of Wight who are caring for a child with a life-threatening or terminal illness. We help these families, however, we can make life a little bit easier as they face the reality that their child may not get better. Our family support worker will be busy on the Isle of Wight throughout February, providing emotional and practical support to 9 families. And they can give parents rare time together, as well as make sure brothers and sisters don't feel left out by organising fun activities for them. So please, make a donation to the Rainbow Trust to help us support even more families on the island, giving parents the break they truly deserve this Valentine's Day. Just visit rainbowtrust.org.uk/donate or text RAIN18 £3 to 770 to make a £3 donation. So there.
And praise for an NHS dentist from Diana Wood in Ryde. I would like to sing the praises of the My Dentist service in Cross Street, Ryde. Where would we be without such dedication? A crown fell out on Saturday morning and I presented myself at reception at 9 a.m. on Monday, January the 30th, with the tooth. I was surprised to be given an appointment for 9:40 a.m. and even more surprised to be called less than 5 minutes later. Within 15 minutes, the crown was cemented back in place, and at 9:20 a.m. I was walking through my front door. What an excellent service, second to none, and for a sum of less than £20. 3 cheers for the National Health Service.
Mm-hmm. And here's a letter from Sally Davis of East Cowes, who says there's an argument to allow term time breaks. And she says, "I have in general a deal of respect for those in public office and am content to assume that decisions they make are made with good reason. However, the pursuit of a £120 fine from Mr. Platt for taking his child on holiday during school time and taking the case all the way to the Supreme Court seems foolish beyond belief, especially when considered alongside the county press headlines of last Friday listing the swinging austerity measures which will need to be taken. Will we be told how much this is going to cost? A large number of families depend on tourism for their livelihood, so that it is impossible for them to take breaks during the Easter and summer holiday periods. It would therefore be reasonable to allow those young people whose attendance record is good and academic achievement satisfactory to take such leave, given that our education is not entirely what is learned in the classroom, and family holidays have an important place in a child's formation.
And from Kirsten Voigt from Wootton Bridge. As a proud participant of the Refugees Are Welcome gathering in Newport on January the 31st, I'd like to clarify a couple of things. As history shows, peaceful protests or demonstrations are an expression of the very part of the society that should be at the core of democracy. The people, demos in Greek, refers to the common people. The examples of history-changing protests are manifold. Gandhi's Salt March in 1930, Nelson Mandela's ANC Party's stay-at-home protest in 1950, March on Washington with Martin Luther King's historic I Have a Dream speech in 1963, the Tiananmen Square protest in Beijing in 1989 that inspired the peaceful change in East Germany in the same year, ending the communist regime, to name but a few. The American anthropologist Margaret Mead famously said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." Many of the participants of the Newport gathering will not only have raised their voice for refugees, and therefore reminded the powerful in Western societies to stick to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 14, but they will be the same people who take action against the racial, sexual and religious discrimination, taking a stand for animal and human rights, helping out in soup kitchens for the homeless, donating time and money for the people on the edge of our wealthy society, and are on eco-alert for our planet. So no, this wasn't just a protest against Donald Trump. Although I haven't been the organiser of the event, I'd like to invite and encourage everybody feeling the same way about defending social justice to join a potential similar event in the near future, including our island MP. It's a truly inspiring experience.
And here's a letter from Molly Attrill in Knighton. Oh, she's a neighbour of mine, and she's writing about the new president of the USA. And she says, "I couldn't disagree more with Andrew Turner's statement regarding protests against Trump. Apologists for Donald Trump would have us believe he is unfairly portrayed by the liberal media, but you only have to listen to live TV coverage of his speeches or read his tweets to know that Trump is a dangerously loose cannon. In a couple of weeks, he has trashed delicate diplomacy built over decades, and there is no evidence at all that he will be changed for the better by the office of president. Of course, the government has to engage with all sorts of heads of state around the world, but it is not necessary to be a toady. It was foolish to issue such a speedy invitation for a state visit before the PM had even met Donald Trump. But it would seem that this is a crass attempt to outdo Nigel Farage and his sinister Breitbart's pals, who were so giddy from their visit to the gilded halls of Trump Tower. We're advised to calm down, to wait and see. So tell us, Mr. Turner, how nasty do things have to get before it's okay to exercise judgment and to speak out against demagogues?" Well, that's someone who doesn't care too much for the Americans.
And from Mr. J. Westmore in Wootton Bridge, "My friend Neil Tosdevin and I are planning a school reunion for former pupils of Carisbrooke High School. This specifically relates to those who would have left either in the summer of 1974 at 16 or the hot summer of 1976 at 18. The reunion will be held at the Riverside Centre, Newport, on Saturday, July the 15th, starting at 7 p.m. It would be appreciated if those interested could contact me at jeremywestmore@yahoo.co.uk or neil at neiltosdevin, TOSDEVIN, @gmail.com, so we can gauge the level of interest and confirm details. I'm thinking a buffet spread might be a good idea. And there's another small letter here about school friends. I was born and brought up in Bembridge. This is from Malcolm Garbett in Waterlooville. I was born and brought up in Bembridge and attended the Fairway Secondary School, Sandown. The years that I attended were from 1959 to 1963, and I am desperate to get in touch with any of my schoolmates or anyone who knew me. And just one more from Mrs. M. Hodges in West Yorkshire. I am trying to trace a Mr. R.J. Wight of Ryde. He wrote poetry and belonged to the Vectis Model and War Games Society. I have tried to trace him through this society, but have been told it doesn't exist anymore. He worked many years ago at Ryde County Hospital. His father was R.J. Wight of Prince Street, Ryde.
And here's a rather sad letter from Mike Tarrant, who's in Bembridge, who says, "My beautiful and beloved wife, Carola, died at the Earl Mountbatten Hospice on January the 14th. I have nothing but praise for the hospice, for the way in which my wife was treated in her final days, and the comfort and sympathy extended to both myself, my sons, and my family. In her time, Carola was the unpaid chairman of Bembridge County Primary, Forelands Middle, and Sandown High Schools. I think, although I am prejudiced, she contributed more for the common good than any overpaid politician, and I have received a number of donations in respect of my wife, which are to be split between the two charities she defined on her deathbed, the hospice and cancer research. As previously stated, I have nothing but praise for the staff of the hospice, but having checked its website, I note all donations made online, which through convenience I wish to do, must be made through an organisation called Just Giving. On further investigation, I find, if I contribute money to the hospice through the medium of Just Giving, there is a service charge of 5% of the funds I contribute. This means that if I decide to donate £1,000 to the Earl Mountbatten Hospice, it will only receive £950. And I find this charge totally excessive, and cannot understand how the management of the hospice have agreed to such an arrangement. Perhaps they'd be prepared to comment?
And from Mike Stark of Chale Green, fight on. Island Rows have an uncanny knack of elevating the art of shooting themselves in the foot to Olympic standards. The latest medal for metatarsal maiming goes for what this county press headline describes as a barking health and safety ruling to have the splendid Queen's 90th birthday parish bench at Willets Cross Shorewell removed. Island Road's ludicrous excuse that the bench represents a hazard, claiming a previous one was hit by an errant vehicle, justifies logic. On the basis of their argument, all roadside signage and buildings would have to be torn down on the grounds of that at some time or another. Vehicles have careered off the adjacent highway and demolished signposts or crashed into buildings. I much appreciate the new bench, as I am sure many others do. I rest there on regular bike rides to take in the glorious views over the village. So I would urge Shorewell's parishioners to fight for their bench in the same way that campaigners fought successfully to have Island Road's similarly soppy anti-cycling signs removed from the Newport to Cowes cycle track.
Oh, depressing lot of letters this week. And here's the final one from Mrs. Marion and J. Lamsey Jones, who are from Cowes. And they say at least, come down and see good work at Northwood Cemetery. And with reference to the work being carried out at Northwood Cemetery, they say, the article did at least give voice to opposing viewpoints, but as a volunteer who is involved with this work, I do feel the visitor is failing to see what we are trying to achieve. I would like to set the record straight on one of the issues voiced. We mean no disrespect to the deceased, nor to visitors to the cemetery. Like cemeteries up and down the country, due to years of neglect, there are quite large areas which need attention, and it is a time-consuming process. And we endeavour to leave pathways clear, as there is only limited space available to us while work is in progress. I'm sure I can speak for my fellow volunteers by saying we love the work and regard the cemetery as a very beautiful place. There are thousands of daffodils, crocuses and primroses about to bloom, and these areas will increase following our clearance of previously impenetrable shrubbery, brambles and ivy. We have no intention whatsoever of damaging the graves, nor are we messing with them in any detrimental way. And I do advise this visitor to look on the Friends of Northwood Cemetery website for an overview of all that is taking place. And better still, come and meet up with us on a Wednesday or a Saturday morning. I work with a very pleasant and friendly group of people, and I can assure the visitors of a cordial greeting. Perhaps he or she will allow us to share our excitement of discovering graves which haven't seen the light of day for decades. And the historical aspect is fascinating. The memorial inscriptions quite moving. They need to be seen. And we would welcome this visitor and anyone else who might like to volunteer a few constructive hours of their time. I personally take great pleasure in helping out at the cemetery and have a firm belief the deceased will be glad to know of our efforts, for surely to ignore and abandon them is truly disrespectful.
And now we're looking back, first of all, 100 years ago, on February the 10th, 1917. A workman had a remarkable escape after going under the wheels of a 3-ton wagon. The man, named Grimshaw, was removing items from a ship which had come ashore at Freshwater when he slipped and the loaded cart crushed his legs. Miraculously, he escaped the incident without a single broken bone. And also the clerk for the County War Agricultural Committee requested that German prisoners of war be sent to the island to help work the land. In a rather vague response, the Board of Agriculture president stated that he was devoting anxious attention to the supply of labour, and left it at that.
And 75 years ago, on February the 14th, 1942, this was written following the recent debacle when iron railings were haphazardly reclaimed by the Ministry of Supply, much to the distress of island residents. Steps were taken to ensure future occurrences were managed more responsibly. It was decided to add a list of exceptions to the Newport Borough, including the railings around the Simeon Memorial Hall on Castle Road. However, all other railings, including those around the burial ground at Church Lytton, were to go. And the Ministry of Agricultural films shown at the Corn Exchange at Newport Market urged people to kill rats, as they should be regarded as Hitler's friends. And the film said rats destroyed a staggering £25 million worth of the country's homegrown food each year.
And 50 years ago, on February the 4th, 1967, the Isle of Wight Committee for the Feed the Mines campaign was dissolved after successfully reaching their fundraising target of £1,000. In today's money, that's £16,656. Destined for Nairobi, the substantial sum would go towards books and education for children. And 1/2 mile of coastline was given to the National Trust by the Isle of Wight Rural District Committee. The land at Afton Down covered 22 acres and extended the existing trust property at Compton. This ensured virtually all the coastline between Freshwater Bay and Chiltern was under the Trust's protection.
Now, a bit closer. 25 years ago, February the 7th, 1992. Thieves deprived St Helens Garden of an unusual and eye-catching feature. An astrolabe, a medieval scientific instrument used to tell time and calculate altitude, was taken from the rear of a house in Eddington Road. Made from copper, the astrolabe was 2 feet in diameter and mounted on a stone pedestal. It was worth £500. That's £949 in today's money.
And just 10 years ago, on February the 9th, 2007, it was 10 years ago the island's very own Chitty Chitty Bang Bang was born. Built by devoted husband Nick Pointing, the car was a present for his avid Chitty fan wife Carolyn. Having acquired nearly every other piece of memorabilia, the only thing missing from their collection was a life-sized model, so Nick spent 4 years converting the 1973 Land Rover. And ill-fated plans to build a multi-storey car park in Shanklin were proffered as a solution to overcrowding on the seafront. In an attempt to reclaim the esplanade, plans for a multi-storey car park were considered, which never transpired.
Yes, and now it's time for Wight Memories. And Donna Newham, who is the Island Odyssey, has taken her more than 2/3 of the island's churches. And this week she heads to the back of the Wight, revealing some of the history of a weather-beaten church which has withstood southwesterly storms, war and architectural interference. And as she says, there's a picture of the St Andrew's Church in Chale, and there's been a place of worship on the site since the 12th century. And she says it's a lovely light in our darkness. At the southernmost point of the island sits the church of St Andrew. Classed as one of the ancient churches, there's been a place of worship here in Chale since the 12th century, when the chapel was dedicated to St Andrew. Originally just a nave and a chancel, and the lord of the manor soon added a manorial chapel which was later extended. And work carried out in the 15th century included the addition of a tower and further extensions.
St Andrews underwent more renovations in the 19th century under the Victorians, who carried out improvements and restorations on most of the island's churches. The interior of St Andrews is atmospherically dark, although to view the beautiful stained glass windows in their full glory, it is perhaps best to leave the lights off. Behind the pulpit is a window depicting St Andrew, the patron of the church, complete with his saltire cross upon which he was martyred. Perhaps the most visible are the Hearn windows. Bequeathed by George Arnold Hearn, they are fine examples of the work of Charles Kemp, whose work can be seen across the country, including Buckingham Palace. The dedication is to James Arnold Hearn, the father of George, an island-born man who died in New York in 1886. There are 2 previous rectors named Hearn listed, and George, a wealthy businessman, obviously wanted to remember his island roots. As well as the 5 windows, he also generously paid for 2 bells, the clock and the organ, which is dedicated to the memory of his daughter Grace, who died just 3 weeks after her wedding to George Bailey Wheeler. As expected of a church of this age, there are many memorials of note.
In the South Chapel is a large tablet dedicated to Sir Henry Worsley, who was a Major General in the Bengal Army and the son of a previous rector. And there's also a window in the south wall dedicated to the memory of his sister, Henrietta Worsley. In the west wall is stained glass memorial depicting St Michael and all angels, dedicated to a previous rector, the Reverend William Rhodes, who died in 1884. And having only served the parish for 15 months, he must have been very special to have such a large window to his memory. And there are a few reminders of the older church, the medieval font, and the piscina is the most obvious.
The tower was built in the 15th century, at the same time as much of the current extension of the church building. The tower is the oldest example of a perpendicular tower on the island, although it has had extensive repair work in later centuries to keep it that way. There is also a memorial, in Latin, to the Reverend John Hearn, who died in 1648. No visit to St Andrews would be complete without a walk around the churchyard. In the grey, forbidding weather of our visit, The churchyard is a grim reminder of the many shipwrecks that have occurred around the island's coast. Perhaps the most famous is that of the Clarendon, which sank in 1836. 18 of the 25 passengers and crew are buried in the churchyard. There are other weathered tombstones, the oldest legible date being 1620, bearing testament to the power of the sea in the stark, treeless churchyard. A leaflet giving full details can be found in the church. For centuries, St Andrew's has stood sentinel over the back of the Wight, keeping watch over the souls in the area, on land and at sea. It has withstood the rigours of the island weather, several invasion attempts, movement from lack of foundations, 2 world wars, and the interference of the Victorians. With the care and dedication of its parishioners and visitors, it should continue to be a distinctive and atmospheric landmark for hundreds more years.
Yes, that's a trail, so it's quite easy to find. And now here's my view from Catherine James, who says, right, let's get this out of the way. I'm not from around here. No matter how long I've lived on the Isle of Wight, nor how much I adore and celebrate its idiosyncrasies, I'll never be a corkhead. However, my lack of forebears gently decaying in the local cemeteries doesn't mean that I'm not allowed to love this place I now call home. And who wouldn't love a county where way more of the weekly newspaper is given over to good news, charity stories, than crimes against the person? A place with a God's Hill model village and its teeny tiny streaker dinosaur footprints clearly visible along a glorious coastline. Hursts. I went to New York a couple of summers ago. Pay attention, and there you are from West Wight, not Newport, but New York.
It is a fantastic city. Skyscrapers, yellow cabs, hot dogs, yada yada. But the best bit about New York was the people I met. They all claimed some sort of ownership of the city, despite many of them not being, as the song goes, a native New Yorker. From the Pakistani taxi driver to the English antiques dealer and the vet from San Diego, they had come there out of choice and had a mutual love of the Big Apple. Recently I was a guest at the Isle of Wight Caledonian Society's Burns Night Supper. As I said, I'm not from around here, nor am I Scottish. I was actually born in Romford, but I am partial to a bit of haggis, so took my seat at the dinner table. Intrigued by this gathering of the clans, I chatted with my fellow diners and inquired if there were any native Scots among us. There were none. Our corner of the Scottish event was populated by English folk, a German, a South African, a Swede, and a charming old boy born in Rhodesia. He'd left well before it became Zimbabwe. All of whom had chosen to settle on this beautiful little island. Also on our table were 2 indigenous Oiler Woiters, one a retired dairy farmer who could trace his island roots back to 300 years.
Like a kilted fella from Rhodesia, he had a distinct accent and was soon filling my head with incomprehensible farming proverbs. W.H. Long would have catalogued for the Isle of Wight dictionary. "There ain't no fertiliser like the master's boat, he chortled. "You write that in your column, Essex." "Have you ever thought about living somewhere off the island?" I probed. "No," he said emphatically. "Why would I want to live somewhere where there's no Hursts?" And there you have it. Whether you were born here or here out of the choice of the people I meet in New York, perhaps we're all united by a mutual love of Hursts. Well, there, if we know the Hursts and we're all in love with them, then it could be fun.
And now we're going behind the news, and this is about healthcare. The provision of healthcare on the island is going to have to change and adapt if it's going to survive. That was the message from outgoing chairman of the Isle of Wight Clinical Commissioning Group, the CCG, Dr. John Rivers, who has spoken exclusively to the county press about the challenges facing the NHS. Last week, the county press reported the CCG has to save £1 million a month for the next 2 years, meaning healthcare on the island could dramatically change if some services are trimmed or scrapped. Dr. Rivers said the NHS was showing signs of strain it never had before, and the island's services were under severe pressure. St Mary's is struggling to cope with the number of patients coming through the door and has had to cancel elective surgery to offer beds to those in need. Throughout his 30-year career, Dr. Rivers has passionately supported the health service and praised those who work within it, but he admits we are now in a period of uncertainty. For me, it is clear the traditional NHS, as it is set up and funded, needs to change, he said. We must look at health and social care as a whole. The people on whom we will depend include domiciliary carers, volunteers and support workers, as well as doctors and nurses. Work that used to be done by doctors is now often done by nurses, pharmacists and care assistants. We need to develop people's roles further to allow them to provide the right care at the right time. Above all, we need to focus on developing services that support us to look after ourselves. Of course, the most vulnerable will need the most intensive support, but in my experience, most people want to be supported to make decisions and take responsibility for managing their own medical problems, as well as keeping themselves healthy. It's no secret the island has struggled to recruit GPs, specialists and nurses, and the staffing challenges have contributed to the pressure St Mary's faces, as well as local surgeries. When I joined the practice in Shanklin 30 years ago, I was one of 70 applicants, Dr. Rivers said. Today, island practices advertising for GPs often receive no applications at all. We must do all we can to attract good people to the island, but we must also face the reality there will be fewer doctors available.
Recruiting to hospital patients can be equally difficult, and the problems of recruitment also extend to nursery and carers. The workforce challenge, alongside those in of an ageing population, often costly improvements in treatment and cuts in funding, means safeguarding the future of the health and social care on the island will not be easy. Keeping the workforce motivated has proved difficult when facing relentless pressure, and Dr. Rivers praised staff who go above and beyond to do their best for the patients. I recognise what makes the National Health Service so invaluable. It is not to be found in the fabric of buildings or equipment, but in people. The people who work in so many capacities to support us when we are at our most vulnerable, he said. And for me, the general practice is the jewel in the crown of the National Health Service. We have the high-quality primary care on the island provided by both large and small practices, and the small practices will continue to play an important part in primary care in the future. Likewise, we have excellent medical staff based in the hospital. Morale is not high when people feel overworked or unable to provide a service of which they can feel properly proud. And part of the solution is to reflect on what we all need to do to allow these people to give of their best. And the island's ageing population has presented a number of challenges, and St Mary's has struggled to free beds because of elderly patients not having a care home to go to or having the right support at home.
Dr. Rivers said, modern medicine means when people are unwell, they need to spend less time in hospital. There is an urgent need to reorganise services for frail people if we are to tackle this issue. The My Life, A Full Life programme provides a framework in which to consider how services can change. At its heart, it describes how services need to be coordinated around the individual. It invites people to ask, Do I need to see a doctor for this problem, or with support and given the right access to information and tests, can I take personal responsibility for ensuring the quality of my care? Embracing technology and using smartphone apps to monitor conditions such as diabetes and hypertension could be a way forward and could help people take control of their conditions at home, Dr. Rivers said. The headlines are gloomy, but I remain optimistic about the future. Nothing can be gained by looking to blame anyone for the situation in which we find ourselves. Working with the CCG, I have met many people who are determined to develop health and care services securely for the future. We need to be brave and support innovation and change in the face of uncertainty.
Yes. And now, here are, point by point, is the way of diagnosing the National Health Service ills. After 6 years as chairman of the Isle of Wight Clinical Commissioning Group, do you feel you have left the National Health Service in a better position than when you started? And the answer is, sadly, not, because of the pressures we're facing. I think the reason we are in trouble is primarily because of the cuts to social care funding and the impact that has on the whole system, and particularly on the National Health Service. There are other challenges around, having an ageing population, difficulty in recruitment and static funding in the National Health Service. And I would put the funding issue at the top of the list, but I think even if that was addressed, all the changes around transportation we're talking about would still have to be done. I don't think it's one or the other. I think we have to do both. We need to make health social care as strong and efficient as possible on the island. So hopefully, when funding improves, we can take maximum advantage of it and put ourselves in a much more secure place.
Can you tell us about some of the positive healthcare work happening on the island? There's some great work around health being done across the island. A good example is the Age UK Care Navigator scheme, which helps people find the right care and support they need. It means we're not so dependent on the statutory sector. Charities are also helping in the mental health sector. We have been working to try to identify vulnerable people rather than waiting until they reach crisis.
And I think it would be nice to go back to the old days when Boy Scouts went on medical badges and they could look after people, but not anymore. Now, can you list the 3 things that would make the island's National Health Service better? I don't think it's as simple as that, and there isn't a simple solution. I think it's about supporting people to make quick changes quicker. One of the most frustrating things I've had over the past 6 years is that there's been lots of good ideas about how things could be improved and how we could work in a more integrated way. But the way things work in the National Health Service and in social services makes change really difficult. It is a system that is resistant to taking initiative. It's very risk averse and very conservative.
You have been critical of rural GPs in the past. Do you think they have a future? I have not been critical of rural GPs. What I have said previously was completely misinterpreted and taken out of context. What I was saying was it is important not to judge quality purely on the number of complaints received. There are lots of other ways of judging quality care, and we should always strive to improve, not to be complacent. I want to be absolutely clear, I have no concerns the quality of care being given by small practices on the Isle of Wight is anything but the best. There's a consultation about primary care at the moment, and within that there is some concern some of the smaller practices may not be sustainable in the future. It is not saying they do not provide good care. And finally, some elective surgery has been cancelled at St Mary's. With the CCG needing to make savings, will there be stricter criteria for knee and hip replacements? The most important thing is to ensure when patients make a decision to have an operation, they are fully informed about that surgery and what it will mean to them. So we're being much more rational and involving the patients as much as possible in making the right decision around having surgery. Again, quality will lead to efficiency and the saving of money, rather than the other way around. It's not about rationing services, it's about ensuring surgery is performed on the people who will get benefit from it, and who are the right people to undergo that surgery. You have to make a decision based on the individual. If somebody is very frail and immobile and has dementia or other complications, then putting them through the stress of surgery would not be the right thing for them. As far as rationing is concerned, there have already been some decisions made around procedures that have a very small percentage of improvement on the patient when you do them. An example would be doing tonsillectomies on children, and another is hernias that are not causing pain.
And of course, we are on a holiday island as much as anything, as people live here. And if you want any entertainment, there's plenty of that going on. At the Medina Theatre, for instance, coming up in February, the 18th and 25th, the Wight Strollers will be presenting Jack and the Beanstalk. And then on the 3rd of March, the Upbeat Beatles are back by popular demand. And on Saturday the 4th of March, the Bon Jovi Experience. And on the 11th of March, finally, Phil Collins with his band. And Sunday, the 12th of March, 9 Below Zero Big Band plus support, and Gary Delaney, and there's something about Gary tour, is on Wednesday, 15th of March. So they're very busy during March, is the Medina Theatre. And on the 23rd of March, a Thursday, the Family Drag Show. Paul Carroll's Music Hall Tavern. A family drag show suggests that it's all males dressed as women. And if you're interested in golf, the voice of golf, Peter Allis, hosts A Question of Golf on Friday the 24th of March at 7:30 p.m. So there's plenty of entertainment going on.
And the John Clare Wind Quintet returned to the island for a concert at Freshwater Methodist Church. Following their sell-out concert last year, the ensemble will be playing next Friday, February the 17th, at 7:30. The evening is themed An Island for All Seasons and is a celebration of the West Wight, with music, poetry, and seasonal and sea-related readings, and some illustrated with visual images. The concert has been arranged by Friends of Freshwater Library. Entry is free, but there will be a retiring collection, with proceeds split between the library and Freshwater Independent Lifeboat.
Yes. The thing about the island is that it is built on entertainment. Practically every village and every town and everywhere has a group of people, at least, who put on shows quite regularly throughout the year. Amateurs, of course, but nonetheless, they are very entertaining. And the Friends of Dimbola and Key Arts will host a live music with an All That Jazz at Sunday at 3 at the Key Arts, Newport, next Sunday, February the 19th at 3 p.m. The lineup includes a variety of recognised island musicians, including John Titley, bass, Dave Gledhill, who's a keyboard, Mike Cook, who plays trumpet and vocals, Dave Robinson, the drums, and Paul Barnett, the trombone. And donations of £5 are requested, with proceeds going to the Key Arts and the Julia Margaret Cameron Trust at Dimbola Lodge. And if you want more details and you've got a computer, head for the website, which is www.keyarts.org.
And Tony Christie is returning to the island on February the 24th with his Golden Anniversary show, and he'll be hoping for a better reception than he received on his first visit 36 years ago. That gig was at the now defunct Warner's Puckpool Holiday Centre on a wet and miserable autumn Saturday. It could have been one of the final reasons that eventually led him to move to Spain to capitalise on his success in Europe. When Tony arrived at that 1981 Ride gig, the audience were already unhappy. It was raining and more than 200 of them had moved into the ballroom. It meant Tony and his band could not hold their tea time sound check. When Tony was due on stage, there were children sleeping on the cabaret floor, flash-happy amateur photographers, excessive chatter from punters, and waiters carrying trays of drinks as if a beer drought was imminent. So Tony's Shanklin Theatre show on Friday, February the 24th, starts at 7:30 p.m. And that's all we have time for today. So
Yes.
It's goodbye from Madeline.
And it's goodbye from Peter. Goodbye.
This is a download from the BBC. For more information and our terms of use, go to www.bbc.co.uk/in-touch. Good evening. Tonight, the blind leading the blind is now widely regarded as a politically incorrect saying. I could almost hear your intake of breath. But like it or not, the question of who is leading the blind is increasingly being asked. More in a moment about the gap at the top of our largest charities and how to fight back when someone fights you.
Something I didn't do, and something Henshaw's helped me with on my very first day here. They gave me a panic alarm. Did I take it with me? No. Why not? Because I'm an idiot.
We'll be hearing how to regain your confidence after a physical attack. But first, both of our largest charities, the RNIB and Guide Dogs, have a vacancy at the top. Leslie Ann Alexander retired from the RNIB last September after almost 13 years in the job. Richard Lehman of Guide Dogs stepped down, the phrase used in the fairly terse announcement of his sudden departure last November. Just a coincidence, no doubt, but both organisations at this moment still have acting chief executives. At a time when it could be argued there are very big decisions to be made and battles to be fought. Certainly listeners have been asking us, what's going on? This is Rose Hewitt, who runs her regional branch of the Circle of Guide Dog Owners.
I'd like to know what is happening about RNIB and Guide Dogs chief executives. The thing is, I'm organising a school reunion at the Lauriston for September and a Circle of Guide Dogs in October at the Clifton. Now, do I go ahead and order places in another hotel, or can we stick with the ones that are already there? I know both have acting chief execs, but I would feel, and I think many other people would feel, more secure if we knew we had permanent chief execs.
Well, we'd like to be able to tell you, Rose, but so far, despite several attempts since Christmas to tempt someone from either organisation onto In Touch to answer questions like that, nobody has been available. What we do know with certainty is that one of the issues being discussed between the previous incumbents was the question of closer cooperation between the two charities. We know this because they told us so. This is Leslie Ann Alexander discussing it with us just before she left.
Well, we continue to explore opportunities for greater cooperation across the whole of the sight loss sector, and that includes guide dogs. And actually at the moment we've got any number of joint projects that we're working up with guide dogs. I'm on very public record as saying I think that having over 700 charities in the sight loss sector is too many. Just for the avoidance of doubt, I've never ever said that there should be just one charity and I'm often quoted as having said that. I've never said there should be just one. There are too many charities in the sight loss sector. If we could have a situation where there was one national organisation and then a whole carpet of really brilliant, high-quality local societies, that for me would be utopia.
And here's Richard Lehman, just a few weeks later, looking forward to dealings with Leslie Ann's acting successor.
We actually have a window of opportunity now. I'm talking to Sally Harvey at RNIB, the acting CEO. We've got lots of ideas. There are plenty of things that we could do together, we want to do together. And all being well, then hopefully you and I will be talking in a few months' time, and we'll be able to talk about some of the things that we've managed to do together.
About a merger?
Well, that's probably quite a long way down the line. So in our heads, and I'm not sure if I'm on record saying this before, but I've always felt that the first step towards unity is some really good, meaty, collaborative projects that deliver results for blind and partially sighted people. And I'm talking to Sally Harvey now. We're always keen to collaborate, and now is no different.
But as we now know, that wasn't to be. Just a few weeks after that interview, Richard Lehman stepped down. Well, Guide Dogs told us in a statement this afternoon, Guide Dogs is working through the timings and process for the recruitment of a permanent chief executive and will update In Touch in the coming weeks. In the meantime, Steve Vade will continue as our acting chief executive. Meanwhile, the RNIB told us in a statement, unfortunately, Sally Harvey was not available for interview on this occasion. However, we're looking to arrange an interview with Sally and Peter Wight in early March. Well, I hope I'm available. But what do we actually know? I've turned to Kevin Mulhern, broadcaster and writer and observer of disability politics for the past 4 decades. Kevin, a brief hiatus at the top of these organisations, does it really matter?
Oh, I think it does. And I think it matters now more than ever, because we are in this situation where we're in the 5th or 6th or 7th year of increasing cuts in social services and in the services which support blind and visually impaired people. And you must never forget that the majority of blind and visually impaired people are elderly people who go blind very late in life. And we do know people are fighting for social services. They're fighting for services across the board. And we have got used, I think in particular, since the days when Ian Bruce ran the RNIB, of them being forceful, representing people and saying what is going on, appearing in the media. You need leadership.
But a chief executive is all very fine, but they've got people, they've got campaigning workers. Doesn't the work go on?
Well, I'm not sure that it does, because bear in mind that the RNIB announced that they were losing their chief executive last May. Although she went in September, it's now February, 9 months later. We knew this person was actually going then. I do think the RNIB have done some fantastic campaigns, some of which I've agreed with, some I haven't agreed with, as irrelevant. They have campaigns, but they've been pretty quiet for the last few months.
What about this issue of closer cooperation between the two charities? Because that has been something that's been bubbling under. It caused disagreement between the two organisations back in 2010, 2011. We heard from those clips that they seem to be coming together. What do you think's going on there?
Well, that is a great question, because it seemed to me that when the Richard Lehman statement seemed to be very, very positive that they were going forward with this discussion, and immediately he's gone. So you ask the question, is there no longer a will to merge them? Is there no longer a will to discuss it? But if you listen to the whole of that Richard Lehman interview, which I've done, and it's on the old In Touch podcasts, there is no question that he thought of going. And I'm sorry, I really don't buy this, that they're going off to spend more time with their family or something. Something happened that made him go. What was it? We certainly have the right to know.
Just explain the arguments for and against, perhaps a bit. I mean, why is it so contentious?
Well, I think the idea that you just have one voice speaking for blind, visually impaired people is worrying. And that would happen if you merge RNIB and Guide Dogs. They're so huge. I mean, they really are the first port of call for people to go and speak to. If they become one, they become more powerful. And the trouble with becoming more powerful, it's two-edged. If you make a mistake, there's nowhere else to go. And maybe to keep the debate going. But if you look at Guide Dogs, I mean, bear in mind, as Rose was saying at the top of the programme, there's still this huge issue about the hotels going on, which are closing down. Not only have you got the hotels, the problems which face society in general are facing blind people. Would it be better to have two groups who not compete with each other, but effectively can have different positions? But I can see why. You know, the idea of 700 organisations at the moment representing blind and visually impaired people, I had no idea that was the number. It is obviously too many, and a certain amount of coordination and pooling your resources is a good idea.
There has been talk, if not of merger, then of federation. You know, that is around. Is there an issue here of leadership, do you think, particularly the question of whether a visually impaired person needs to be at the top of such an organisation?
Well, I've always said this, that in fact that one of the best qualifications for running an organisation for or of the blind is to be blind or to be visually impaired. That's a huge qualification. I think it also makes a statement to people to say, you know, that blind people are capable of doing it, including running this organisation. Now, the problem is, and I hate saying it, if you get some, you know, opinionated old so-and-so like myself running it, probably the worst possible thing in the world, because you don't want an egotist running. You need a representative blind or visually impaired person. I think that is part of the issue, but I think the other part of the issue are both organisations, you see, because people are asking this question. Are they hanging back because they've got an idea of somebody who they want to put up who isn't actually available at this moment to take over the organisations? And the idea that they can tell, you know, it's not In Touch they're telling, it's the blind public they're telling, that they can explain what they're up to in a month's time, but not today, when they've known that this is the RNIB, we're losing their Director General last May, is quite frankly ridiculous.
Just finally, Kevin, this is all politics, of course,
Absolutely.
But as far as people are concerned, is this affecting services for blind people?
Well, obviously you've got the hotels issue with guide dogs, which is causing an awful lot of grief still out there. People are still very upset about that. In terms of me as a consumer with the RNIB, I actually think they're providing very good services at the moment. I mean, one thing I'm an absolute avid listener to now is a thing the RNIB do called Tech Talk. It's a podcast. And for the average, you know, techie, when I'm not very technical, as you will know, it's fantastic. The newsstand is fantastic. The Talking Book service, which is now free, is actually fantastic. The only thing that does worry me, when you said I've been around for 4 decades, it's true. When I started on this programme in the 1970s, the producer at the time, Thena Heschel, kept enforcing on us as youngsters, you and me, we were young then, kept reminding us that the average blind person is really what we called in those days the blind register. For a couple of years, they go blind late. The question is, I just hope that people are looking out for them, because I don't know what services they are getting.
Kevin Mulhern, thank you very much indeed. And do let us know your views, and we'll continue to invite RNIB and guide dogs onto the programme to answer these questions. Now, from my experience and from a lot of visually impaired people that I talk to, it would be wrong to suggest that every time we venture out, we face the risk of verbal abuse and even violence. But it does happen, and recent statistics suggest that hate crime against disabled people has risen sharply over the past year or so, up by 44%. That could, of course, be partly the result of more awareness and more reporting of such crime, and Home Office statistics don't distinguish between crimes against different types of disabled people. The question is, when it does happen, how do you deal with it? Les Lightfoot from Manchester has been forced to give that some thought. Last April, he popped out to collect something from his local chemists. Just as he made his way back into his apartment block, he was threatened and then subjected to a serious assault. Les had to spend the next couple of days in hospital, initially unconscious and at first unable to remember exactly what had happened to him. But since then, with the help of Henshaw's Society of Blind People, he's been rebuilding his confidence and has now produced his own set of tips to help other visually impaired people with personal safety. Our reporter Tom Walker has been to meet Les at the Henshaw's Resource Centre in Old Trafford.
It was essentially my worst nightmare, walking out on my own, being aware that there were people close to me who weren't really involved with me directly but felt too close for comfort. It was only when I got to the first floor balcony that someone grabbed me from behind and pushed me against the banister. At that point I did what everyone tells you not to do. I tried to grab hold of him. I tried to stop him from getting my wallet. And at that point he said to me, "Don't fight me." And he said it in a very sort of powerful, sort of military, sort of as if it was a military order, as if he had sort of training in that sort of thing. And almost immediately started hitting me on the head. and in fact he knocked me out. I was unconscious. And that's really the last I remember. The next thing was waking up in hospital. Somebody called the police and the ambulance. I woke up in hospital and discovered there that I had a broken kneecap, badly damaged shoulder, and quite severe bruising to the head.
Do you think being visually impaired, and being obviously visually impaired as well, put you at greater danger, made you more of a target?
I do, yeah, but I really don't want to sort of overplay that. People get assaulted every day, and only a tiny proportion of them are visually impaired.
Les's top tips for personal safety have been published on the Henshaws website, and I think Les is about to open it up now. Are you, Les?
Right, I've just got to the site. Something has happened. I've always believed that out of the worst things in life, some good can come from it. And this is my attempt at getting something positive from this experience.
So could you summarise the advice for us?
Yeah, essentially is not to go out with half of your household possessions, but because sometimes when I'm out I can get tired, I've occasionally considered getting a taxi back home, so I always take a small amount of cash with me. If I take my bank card with me, it's in a different pocket. So why that day did I take my wallet? And I believe it's because my wallet could be seen from my jeans pocket by this person, that they realised, because they went straight to my pockets.
And what other advice is there on here, Les?
Don't resist in any way. As I found out from my own experience, it just led perhaps to a more serious incident than it might otherwise have been. Unfortunately, in that situation, you are acting instinctively, so it's not always easy to think, what should I do now? You haven't got the time. The other thing, something I didn't do, and something Henshaws helped me with on my very first day here, they gave me a panic alarm. Did I take it with me? No. Why not? Because I'm an idiot.
You've mentioned, obviously, don't take out your whole household possessions and things like that, but are there any other things that we can do as blind and partially sighted people to reduce our vulnerability when we're out and about?
I would always stick to busier routes where there are plenty of people who can see what's happening, and avoid shortcuts through alleyways and things like that, because that's when you are most vulnerable. Stick to the main roads where there are plenty of people.
Since the instant you've been coming to Henshaws Resource Centre, you're a member of the guitar group. To what extent does that kind of social activity, that kind of interaction help you?
I think the major thing is everything Henshaws does has a social aspect to it. I've made a lot of good friends here. Some I know actually, we have evenings out in Manchester with some of them. But I think more important than that, it's a safe space. I get help to travel here because it's a little bit awkward for me to use public transport. And once I'm here, it's as if I'm in my own home with friends, but not just friends, people who can really help me. And I've had as much help from the professionals who work here, very well qualified and people I have a lot of respect for, but I've also had a lot of help from other service users who give you little tips, which might seem like little tips at the time, but they can make a big difference.
The assault obviously knocked your confidence massively. How would you describe yourself confidence-wise now?
My confidence is still a little bit of a problem. Physically, I'm okay. I've got over all the physical effects by and large. Still not as confident as I would like to be outside. I'm still having a little bit of flashback sort of things. I'm trying to go out a little bit more on my own, but the difficulty is not just mine. My partner is also now quite fearful of me going out alone. So my partner's as much to recover from as I have in a way.
Les Lightfoot ending Tom Walker's report. And if you want to add to that or tell us your own experiences, you can call our action line on 0800 044 044 for the next 24 hours. Or you can email intouch@bbc.co.uk, and you can tweet using #InTouch. From me, Peter White, producer Cheryl Gabriel and the team, goodbye.